You look at your elderly parent every day. You make sure they're fed. You check if they've taken their medication. You ask, "How are you feeling?" And they say, "Fine." And you believe them. But here's what nobody tells you. Fine is often the most loaded word in the English language when it comes from a person who was raised to never complain. It's not a status update. It's a shield. And your parent learned to hold that shield up decades before you were born, in a generation where showing pain was considered weakness and silence was considered dignity. So while they hold that shield up with a practiced smile, their body is quietly telling a completely different story. The truth is, emotional suffering in elderly people doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with tears and dramatic confessions. It hides. It camouflages itself inside behaviors you've been misreading for months, maybe years. What you thought was stubbornness is actually fear. What you called getting old is actually grief. And what you dismissed as a bad habit is actually a cry for connection. This video is about the 5 physical signs your elderly parent is suffering emotionally. Not medically, not physically, emotionally. And by the time you get to sign number 5, you're going to rethink the last conversation you had with them entirely. Stay with us. Sign number 1 is a change in eating behavior, and not the kind your doctor warned you about. Most people hear elderly parent not eating well and immediately think dental problems, medication side effects, digestive issues. And yes, those are real. But there is a dimension to this that medicine often skips over because it doesn't show up in a blood test. When a person loses their emotional will to live fully, the first thing that quietly dies is appetite. Think about that for a second. Food is not just fuel. It has never just been fuel. Food is memory. Food is ritual. Food is love made edible. When your mother stops finishing her chai, when your father pushes the plate away from a dish he used to request specifically, when someone who once took pride in cooking suddenly has no interest in eating, that is not a digestion problem. That is a meaning problem. Researchers at the University of Michigan found that socially isolated elderly individuals showed significantly higher rates of appetite loss compared to those with regular emotional engagement. The hunger didn't disappear because the body stopped needing food. The hunger disappeared because the person stopped feeling like the meal was worth it. They stopped feeling like they were worth it. And here is the part that breaks most adult children when they finally understand it. Your parent isn't being difficult at dinner. They're telling you, in the only language they feel safe using, that something inside them has gone quiet. The actionable insight here is this. Don't just monitor what they eat. Sit with them while they eat, not with your phone in your hand, not with one eye on the TV. Sit with them the way they once sat with you when you were sick and needed someone to just be present. Eating together is one of the oldest forms of emotional medicine. It signals, without words, that this person belongs somewhere, that their presence at the table matters, that the meal is incomplete without them. That is what your parent is starving for. Not calories, connection. Sign number 2 will make complete sense the moment I say it, but you've been explaining it away for a long time. It's sleeping too much, and not in the way tiredness explains. This isn't the body recovering from a hard day. This is your parent sleeping 10, 11, 12 hours and waking up with nothing to show for it. This is naps in the afternoon, early bedtimes, and a general reluctance to start the day. You've told yourself it's age, and partly, yes, sleep patterns do shift as the body gets older, but that explanation has been letting you miss something important. For most of your parents' life, mornings had weight. There was a reason to get up, a household to run, children to feed, work to get to, prayers to complete before the day started, an identity that waited for them on the other side of getting out of bed. That identity was not just what they did. It was who they were, provider, decision maker, the person the family turned to. And now, that role has been slowly handed off. The children are grown. The house runs itself, or someone else runs it. The daily rhythm that gave their mornings meaning has dissolved. And when a person no longer has a clear answer to the question, why am I getting up today? The bed stops being a place of rest and becomes a place of residence. A 2020 review published in Aging and Mental Health found that elderly individuals who experienced role loss, retirement, bereavement, or children leaving showed significantly higher rates of prolonged sleep and low morning motivation independent of any clinical depression diagnosis. This is not a medical mystery. This is a person whose days have lost their architecture, and the solution is not to pull them out of bed with activities and schedules. The solution is to rebuild their sense of being needed. Ask for their opinion on a real decision you're making. Let them teach you something they know better than anyone else. Call them in the morning not to check on their health, but to ask what they think. Give their waking hours a reason that belongs specifically to them. That shift from managed to needed is more powerful than any sleep remedy you'll find at a pharmacy. Sign number 3 is one that will genuinely surprise you because it looks nothing like sadness. It looks like irritability. It looks like your parents snapping at you for small things, getting disproportionately angry about a misplaced remote control or a changed TV schedule or a slight deviation in their daily routine. You've probably internally labeled this as crankiness or blamed it on pain or medication. And those factors can contribute. But here's the hidden truth that most families miss entirely. Anger in an elderly person who was never particularly angry before is almost always a secondary emotion. It is sadness that has nowhere else to go. It is grief that doesn't know how to express itself in a culturally acceptable way. Think about the generation your parents came from. These are people who were taught that emotions were private, that resilience meant silence, that complaining was weakness, that you carried your pain the way you carried your responsibilities, without asking for help and without making a scene. There was no language given to them for vulnerability. Nobody sat them down and said it's okay to feel lost. So when the loneliness becomes unbearable, when the grief of outliving friends and spouses and the version of themselves they used to recognize, when all of that builds up with nowhere to go, it leaks out as anger. Because anger at least feels like strength. Anger is the one emotion that doesn't make you feel small. A 2019 study published in the journal Psychology and Aging noted that elderly individuals with suppressed emotional processing showed significantly higher rates of emotional dysregulation, including frequent irritability, than those who had regular emotional outlets. Your parent isn't angry at you. They're angry at what's happening to them, and they don't have the language, the permission, or the safe space to say so. The insight here is counterintuitive but critical. Don't meet their anger with logic or defense. We'll meet it with curiosity. You seem really frustrated today. Is everything okay? That question, asked gently and genuinely, opens a door that logic and counter-arguments will always keep shut. Their generation was never taught to walk through that door, but if you hold it open long enough, they will. Sign number 4 is the one that hides in plain sight so effectively that most families mistake it for a personality change. It's your parent stepping back from the role they spent a lifetime building. And this goes deeper than losing interest in a hobby. What you're watching is an identity crisis that nobody has named for them. Your father built his entire sense of self around being the provider, the one who fixed things, the one whose judgment the family trusted. Your mother's identity was woven into the meals she cooked, the festivals she organized, the way the household reflected her care. These were not just activities. They were the answer to the question, who am I? And now, quietly and without ceremony, those roles have been transferred. Someone else makes the financial decisions. Someone else runs the kitchen. Someone else is the capable adult in the room. And your parent, who never retired from their sense of self, even if they retired from their job, is left standing in a house that no longer needs them the way it once did. That loss doesn't announce itself dramatically. It shows up as the garden that goes untended, the festival that gets organized without their input, the grandchildren who are disciplined by rules your parent had no say in, the cricket match they used to watch with passion now playing to an empty chair. A 2021 study from the University of Queensland found that identity continuity, the feeling that who you are has remained consistent and valued across life stages, was among the strongest predictors of emotional well-being in adults over 65. When that continuity breaks, the withdrawal isn't laziness. It's a person quietly grieving the loss of themselves. What you can do, and this requires intention, not just time, is to restore their authority in some specific, real domain of your family life. Not a courtesy role, not being asked to sit and watch, being genuinely consulted, being the person whose experience shapes the outcome. If they can't stand long enough to cook the full meal, pull a chair to the kitchen counter and let them direct you through the recipe while you do the work. Keep them as the expert. Keep them as the person whose presence creates something real. Because the moment your parent feels irreplaceable again, even in one small domain, they come back. Not all at once, but they come back. Sign number 5 is the one that changes how you see every interaction you've had with your parent for the last year. It's over-apologizing, or it's mirror image, excessive guilt about being a burden. When your parent says things like, "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine on my own," or "You have your own life, don't waste time coming here," or "I'm sorry for being so much trouble," you probably hear it as humility, as independence, as their personality. But listen more carefully. These aren't statements of self-sufficiency. These are statements of self-erasure. When a person repeatedly positions themselves as an inconvenience, as less deserving of time and attention, as someone whose needs are automatically less valid than everyone else's, that is emotional suffering wearing the costume of politeness. And it runs deep. This is a generation that measured their own worth entirely by what they could contribute. Their value was in their usefulness. They cooked, so they were needed. They earned, so they were respected. They gave, so they had a reason to take up space. And now, in a stage of life where they need more than they can give, that entire value system turns against them. They can no longer justify their own presence by the old metrics. And nobody has given them new ones. A research from Harvard Medical School on elderly loneliness and self-perception found that feelings of being a burden were among the strongest predictors of depression and emotional deterioration in people over 65. The fear of being a burden is not a minor concern your parent is managing quietly. It is, for many elderly people, the central emotional crisis of their later years. They watch you drive a long distance to visit, and they feel guilt instead of joy. They need help with a task, and they rehearse the apology before they even ask. They downplay their loneliness because they've convinced themselves that their loneliness is your problem and not their right. And the tragic part is that this happens in families where the love is completely real, where you would do anything for them, where the desire to help is genuine and deep. The disconnect isn't love. It's that your parent has no framework for receiving love that isn't transactional. They were never taught that they deserve care simply for existing, simply for being yours. So tell them, not once, regularly, not "Don't worry, it's fine," because that just confirms to them that there was something to worry about in the first place. Say instead, "I'm here because I want to be here, not because I have to be, because being with you is something I choose." That distinction, want versus obligation, is the difference between your parent feeling like a loved person and feeling like a managed one. Your presence should never feel like a chore they're imposing on you. And when they finally start to believe that, when the apologies get quieter and the smiles get a little more willing, you'll know that something real has shifted, not in their age, not in their health, but in their understanding that this life, the one they're still living right now, is still completely worth being present for.